This is Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and he is being asked about Trump being a threat to democracy. Listen to what he says. Smart cookie, this one.
People talk about the threat to democracy that Trump poses. Do you really think that is an equal evil to Biden?
I mean, listen, I can make the argument that President Biden is a much worse threat to democracy. And the reason for that is President Biden is the first candidate in history, the first president in history that has used the federal agencies to censor political speech, so to censor his opponent. I can say that because I just won a case in the Federal Court of Appeals and now before the Supreme Court. It shows that he started censoring not just me. 37 hours after he took the oath of office, he was censoring me. No president in the country has ever done that. The greatest threat to democracy is not somebody who questions election returns, but a president of the United States who used the power of his office to force the social media companies, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, to open a portal and give access to that portal to the FBI, to the CIA, to the IRS, to CISA, to NIH, to censor his political critics. President Biden, for the first president in history, to use his power over the Secret Service to deny Secret Service protection to one of his political opponents for political reasons. He's weaponizing the federal agencies. Those are really critical threats to democracy.
Donald Trump, of course, tried to overturn a free and fair election. He tried to overturn one, right? He's still fighting in court.
Yes.
How is that not a threat to democracy?
Well, I think that is a threat to democracy. If trying to overthrow the election clearly is a threat to democracy. But the question was, who is a worse threat to democracy? And what I would say is, I'm not going to answer that question, but I can argue that President Biden is, because the First Amendment, Aaron, is the most important. Adams and Hamilton and Madison said, we put the guarantee of freedom of expression in the First Amendment because all of our other constitutional rights depend on it. If you have a government that can silence its opponents, it has license for any atrocity.
So just to be clear, you're saying you could make an argument that President Biden is a worse threat to democracy than Donald Trump. That's what you just said.
But who else has ever tried to send, what president in history has ever tried to censor political opponents? What president has weaponized the federal agency? When my father came into the Justice Department, the first week he was there, he got all of the branch and division attorneys together, and he said, whatever we do, we are not going to use the power of the Justice Department for political reasons.
Trump, of course, has said that he would do that. He has said that he would do that.
Of course, and that is reprehensible.
And he is the only president who's tried to overthrow the results of an election.
Well, you know what? Let me say something about that. I'm not going to defend President Trump on that. That was appalling. And there's many things that President Trump has done that are appalling. But in 2001, we had an election stolen in this country during the Bush-Gore election. In 2004, I wrote an award-winning article for Rolling Stone that showed how that election was stolen from John Kerry. So I don't think, and most Americans agree with me about 2001, that it was a stolen election from the Democratic Party candidate. So I don't think people who say that the election is stolen, not that we shouldn't make pariahs of those people. We shouldn't demonize them. We shouldn't vilify them. What we should be doing is saying, let's all get together, Republicans and Democrats, and fix the election system so that it cannot be fixed, so that we're the exemplary democracy of the world. We ought to, Las Vegas, let me tell you this, Las Vegas is built on machines that can count and never make mistakes. Can't we make an election machine, and can't we have an electoral process that every American says whatever happens?
Okay, hold on.
It can't be fixed.
I understand that we want elections to be as perfect as they possibly can be, and one should not use the fact that the election was not stolen and was not cheated to not try to perfect it. I understand that distinction, but when you do as you're doing, and you open the door to, well, we want every machine. You're opening the door to people who can say, well, then that's exactly what I'm saying. The machines miscounted, the machines did this, but they didn't. Every single analysis has shown that did not happen, right? As you know. Do you worry that you're opening the door for people to believe this? Look at the Republican primary voters and that they believe.
I'm not worried. I don't worry about how people might misinterpret my words. What I said, I mean, and I'm careful about how I use language. So I'm not saying that that election was just, that there was cheating. I've never said that. What I've said is that there are problems, particularly, Aaron, if you don't have paper ballots. The election machines can be fixed in various ways, and that's just a fact.
They're not mentioning how Hillary Clinton challenged it. We didn't have these problems when it was penciled
Paper
in.
ballot.
You do paper ballots and you count them in front of a live camera streaming all through. And then like I always said, you have fingerprints. And if you don't have fingerprints, you have face recognition, because fingerprints will pick up felons. You're not supposed to vote. They'll know if you're there and you're not supposed to be there. They'll know if you're not a citizen. But no, now they got rid of the signature cards.
What I loved about this interview, and why I specifically bring the CNN and MSNBC and the very lib interviews to the show, is because I know most of our viewers are not watching those stations. But I wanted people to see that these reporters, they're not reporters anymore. She was debating him. She was pushing him to agree with her agenda, that this was ridiculous, that no election can be stolen, that there was information. And he came back at her. And this is why I like Robert F. Kennedy. I don't care for his politics. I care for some of his politics, but not all of it. And, certainly love that he's in the race, because he's going to take votes from Biden. But beyond that is, he said that the 2001 election was stolen and the 2004 election was stolen. Well, I could tell you what, I could see why anybody would think that 2001 was stolen. I was there biting my nails.
2001, yeah.
2001, Bush Gore. I mean, the hanging chads. That was something that was never done before. And it happened to be the state that Bush's brother was the governor of, and the attorney general was a Republican. And that was the state that put him over the top. Could we see why people would think that election was stolen? Absolutely. Absolutely. But there was a process, and it was not verified, but it was the Congress ratified the election, and that was the end of it. The same thing happened here, because a lot of us knew that there were anomalies in the voting process this time due to COVID. And a lot of us lived through the
He
Bush
tried to
War.
stop election day, Biden, during COVID. He tried to cancel it, and they overturned it.
Right. And this has been going on. I remember when Giuliani tried to change the election in 2001 because of the Twin Towers, the 9/11. And he wanted to keep another term. So stuff like this happens all the time. But what happened in 2020 is no different than what has happened in the past. And that's why Nancy Pelosi did what she did to ensure that she got that election ratified, because once it was ratified, that's it. There is no mechanism to overturn it. And that's why they made such a ridiculous situation out of it, saying that it was an insurrection. These elections have been questioned over and over again, but the left, have to continue to try to label that questioning of that election as an insurrection to keep their agenda going. And Kennedy is not willing to play along.
So having them in office and in government is like having Putin in charge of everybody. You're never going to win, no matter what you do. It's just not going to happen. The only way that they can count votes is on live television, and even then, with elected, if not judges, maybe that you voted in, sitting there counting them on TV, showing you go and give it in. There's no way to
that you could have a perfect election.
The Board of Elections, people come into the Board of Elections from people that basically appoint them and bring them in and give them positions.
Yes.
So if you have Democrats running the Board of Election, you're going to have more Democrats in the Board of Election. If you have a Republican, it's going to be more Republican.
Yeah.
I've seen it. With you were there, every people that I know were there, and I've seen it turn like a revolving door from Republican to Democrat, and Funny, so those are the terms they win most of the time.
And that's why the paper ballot, and he said it, the same thing that Trump was saying, the paper ballots are the only way to do this. These mail-in ballots,
No.
they
I
don't
can't
work.
even
Other
get
countries won't
I
use
mailed
them.
my tax checks for my company out. They still haven't gotten them.
Yep.
I gave them to the mailman.
Yep.
It's been 3 weeks. They're gone. Now I'm getting penalized. Like,
So whether you like him or not, what I'm saying is, that interview said a lot. It showed us a lot about CNN, that they're not reporting, they're debating, they're trying to push their agenda forward, which we know, but you really see it here because usually they just bring on people on that show that are going to kiss their ass and agree with them. This guy stood up and said, wait, no. And hey, by the way, I questioned elections too. And we all know that to be true.